up, you guys? This is Rob from Guy Plays, and today on the Snapshot, we're going to be taking a look at Saryn's rework, as well as the loadout that I like running along with it. And yes, I said loadout, so it's not just going to be the build itself, but I'm going to show you how to build a Za that works quite perfectly with her new Spores. Alright, so let's jump right on into the changes to Spore. As you can see right here, it looks very similar. There is no duration attached to it, so it will keep ticking and ticking and ticking. And of course, the status chance is still tied to power strength, so no big changes there. However, the one thing that you will notice is when you run out of enemies inflicted. So you can see we've got the little counter for the damage that goes up, and then we've got the infected that are right down there. I'm going to go ahead and pump some slash procs into this guy real quick. And as you can see, once he goes down, which if I can get a good shot at him, should be fairly soon, you'll actually go ahead and see that it now says, or very soon says, just die. Listen, Billy, just die. Just die. There you go. It now says decaying. So down in the bottom right there, the damage that you're doing with your Spore is decaying. However, if you can recast it on an enemy, it'll actually stop the decay and it'll slowly climb back up, which is absolutely fantastic because it lets you maintain the damage that you've built up. And especially if you've managed to build up a lot of damage, it's going to have to work through that big number all the way to drop back down to its base. Now, me personally, I feel like the decay is a little fast, but once we start talking about the build, there's some arguability to that fact. You know, it's nice to be able to, you know, out damage everybody in your squad by a large margin, but at the same time that does kind of interfere with their gameplay. I get a little greedy, it's true, but you know, we'll talk about that in a sec. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump into the performance of this specific build. As you can see, I've got Toxic Lash on, and I'm actually gonna move along over here. And I'm going to show off one of the great things about being able to recast Spores. Now, as you can see, when I recast it, we're at like 244, and you see that the number actually drops real quick. And that's kind of like your payment for being able to recast it. Is it does take down the damage just a little bit. However, it does help you spread it. So in the previous variant, we only had one Spore to work with, and we had to manually move it every single time. But in this case, we're actually able to recast it in different areas, and the Spore will just continuously spread and spread and spread and spread as long as you can kind of keep it moving. As you can see right here, we're able to recast it real quick, and we get to keep a little bit of the damage in there. If I hadn't lollygagged, I would have been able to get at it just a little bit better. But as you can see, I'm making sure that it spreads to every single angle, and the reason why I'm so aggressive with trying to spread it is because of one of the, I mean, I guess you would call it a nerf, but really it balances out the ability a little bit more. Spores no longer spread on Spore death. So Spores will spread if you kill the enemy, if your allies kill the enemy, if you hit one of the Spore, or if the enemy is struck with a Toxic Lash inflicted blow, right? However, the one thing that it does not do is that if the Spore kills the enemy, then the enemy will no longer spread the Spore to other surrounding enemies. So now, as you can see, that's one of the issues. As soon as your ability starts scaling higher and you start dealing more damage, the Spore is gonna kill. The Spore is going to kill these enemies, so you kind of have to work really well with using Miasma to kind of see if you can, I guess you would say, intercept some of those Spore deaths, or you really have to be active in spreading the Spore. So that really prevents you from, you know, just kind of like standing in one spot and just, you know, spamming AoE weapons or tossing out a Zenistar in one place to kind of try to spread it, because now the Spores themselves, they won't spread upon the death. So that is definitely a big change that they added on in. I know it's going to make some people a bit upset at that fact, but you know, me personally, I'm an active Saryn player as it is. You know, it's not about sitting on your butt. When you play the game, you want to come in to play the game, not to kind of let Spores play the game for you. But as you can see, this build works quite well. I'm very, very fond of it. So let's go ahead and jump into the loadout, because it's not just about Saryn's build, it's also about the build of the ZA itself. So one thing I do need to clear up for you guys, I've done a lot of playtesting live on stream, and I've also done it just kind of on my own personal time. From what I've found with this build thus far is it will hit from about 35%, you know, if you're getting in a real competitive group. Like, I'm talking about another Saryn, an Equinox, and one of the Link build Trinities. I was in there, and I was still pulling 35% of the damage output. However, if you're in a team that, you know, has some supports and maybe isn't, like, let's say, isn't the most aggressive, you can easily pull into the 60% pluses. That is a little bit of a downturn from the previous variation where you could get like 80 plus damage in the group, but, you know, we're optimizing as best we can with the current mechanics that we have in. So that's the consistent thing that I've been finding with this build. However, it's a two-part build. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got going on right now. So aside from the standard survivability mods and a little bit of efficiency thrown in, because you do need a bit of efficiency, we have a really tossed a lot into range, because we want to make sure that we spread the spores as best as possible, especially since we're not getting to do that during spore death. So, you know, when an enemy is killed by a spore, it's spore death. So we need to definitely aggressively spread our spores. We've also focused a little bit on compensating for overextended with intensify and power drift, as well as growing power. And I've got Hunter's Adrenaline in there to kind of keep you fueled. I always like to have two types of efficiency mods at some point, and that's basically the core of this, is we're trying to get a good amount of range on it without absolutely killing strength. And the reason that we want to do that is because when you recast your spores, like I was saying earlier, it's going to take a chunk out of your stacks. And the thing is, with the Saryn build, the big issue is that you need a little bit of everything. If you tank duration, your stacks, when you run out of enemies on the field, and it happens a lot, when you run out of enemies on the field, your stacks will start dropping super fast. So if you go into the negatives of duration, it's definitely going to hurt you, and you might as well be starting from scratch at that point. Now, of course, the range, we want that as much as possible because we want to spread those spores. That's how you do a lot of damage with Saryn, is you need to spread them. That sounds bad. And then, of course, you've got a bit of power strength, because power strength advocates how much you're going to be taking away from your recast, and it also helps kind of like increase the growth rate of your spores. You don't want to go into negatives, because the thing about it is your growth rate is also determined by your power strength. So it's a bit of a juggling act when it comes down to this, and as you can see right here, I have no duration, and I'm really counting on the range of my spores to help not having to worry about that. But as you guys know, one of the tricks that I like to use too, if something's just out of range, I always like just do a Hail Mary pass and just cast Miasma and hope that the Miasma will kill the enemy instead of the spore, and then the Miasma will end up spreading it to the surrounding enemies from that target. Now, one of the things that you see is definitely missing from this build, of course, is a regenerating molt. It's definitely a big thing that Saryn like works so well with and helps keep her alive. However, with this build, I've decided we're going to go ahead and let one of our melee weapons help us out with a little bit of survivability. So as you can see right here, this is the build that I've got on the weapon, or for the ZA that we're working with, is I've got a Plague Kiwar Strike, a Plague Bokwin Grip, and linked 2 is the Jai 2. So that keeps it balanced, but if you really wanted to, you could go full status on this. So let's take a look at the current build that we're rocking with there. So we've got Prime Pressure Point, Prime Fury, and Prime to Reach, because we definitely want a lot of that range. We've got Condition Overload, and then of course we've got some Viral going in. Now the reason that we use Viral is because now, on the weapon itself, we should have Toxin, we will have Viral, and we will have Corrosive. So because of the spores, just to clarify. And of course we've got Drifting Contact to help push the damage a little bit further, and then it's got some status chance. But the trick that we've got here is Healing Return. So this should definitely keep Saryn fairly healthy and hopefully offset the loss of regenerating molts. Now, this does hurt because I do love using a little bit of body count and blood rush with this, but this weapon setup is actually not necessarily used to kill the enemy, but to kind of lay down some slash procs, lay down some viral, all of that kind of stuff, so that you can keep your health up and help spread the spores with Toxic Lash. Because as you guys know, when you hit an enemy with Toxic Lash, that is also going to spread the spores too. So that's kind of like the main job of this wombo combo between Saryn and Zaws. And if you guys haven't played around with Zaws, you definitely need to get into it because you can really customize them. In fact, I'm almost thinking of creating a Zaw specifically for Saryn so that she could go and have like an extreme status Zaw, so that it'd just be full on status all the time, every time, and it synergizes really, really well with the fact that we are using the growing power aura on her. So that way future recasts of her Spore are gonna cost a little bit less, ramp up a little bit faster, and it all just kind of synergizes really, really well together. So with that said, you've seen how it kind of works here. Let's go ahead and jump into a game. All right, so very similarly to the previous setup that we had, the big focus on this kind of setup is the fact that you want to make sure to spread your spores. You want to make sure to get them everywhere as fast as possible, get them ticking on everything. So as you can see, we have some on one end of them going, and then we have some on this end as them going. But you can see we've got a decay going on. So you really want to make sure that you're paying attention to the fact that, you know, how many you have infected, what exactly is going on. But as you can see, we can basically sweep through these enemies fairly easily and have them spread because we've got a good amount of range. See, and if you hear that little means that you're in a decay status. So pay very, very close to the audio cues. I'm not sure if you guys are able to hear it, but you really do want to make sure that you do that. And also, be sure that you are recasting your Toxic Lash, because that is definitely one of those things that that can happen. You kind of get into like a zone and you're like, I'm murderationing everything, and then you're like, oh wait, shit. You're like, wait a second. Oh, and as you can see here, we're regenerating our health with a little bit of help from Arcane Grace. I did have 2 of those on there as well. But yeah, see, I heard the little squidge. We've got a little bit of that as well. But the healing, what is it called? The healing return also works quite well with it in order to keep your damage up and everything. And then again, we can recast if there are no enemies that have it. But make sure that you are spreading those spores as much as you can. See, I always forget to freaking to recast my Toxic Lash, and that is definitely a big part of making this build work, because you want to spread them as much as possible, since your spores won't be spreading much on death itself. So, ooh, I heard the juiciness. There you go. Recast it again. Get those ones cast. And you get a lot of range with this build too, so don't forget that you don't need to be right up close and personal in order to cast your spores. Just make sure, we got a little thing on there, so let's do a bit of a progress report on what's going on. So we've got 77% of the damage so far, and I'm not quite sure what everybody else is running in the team. I think I saw a Volt maybe, and maybe a Rhino. Yep, we've got a Volt in here, so we've got a Volt. And maybe, I'm not sure what that is, an Equinox? I actually can't tell. But they're moving fast, and we're spreading the spores as far and as wide as we can. This is kind of just a demonstration of how to do it. Again, we're not really looking for the kills as much as we are to make sure that we are spreading the spores. Also, don't do what I did there. There were clearly enemies that were around that had the spore infecting them, right? So, you don't necessarily want to, you don't necessarily want to have to cast spores if you don't need to, but also be sure that you are pushing your spores into certain areas, right? You can still do it. I think we got a Rhino here too. You can kind of push the spores into specific areas in order to kind of move them. But as you can see right now, I'm decaying quite a bit. So what I need to do, is not be lost in this tunnel. Oh, thank God. Thank God. Thank God I was able to catch it just a little bit. Now, if I'm going to talk about kind of like my feelings on this so far, I know from, you know, personal chats that the thing about it is they didn't want to make Saryn as overbearing as she was coming off with the last variant. Plus, they also wanted to make sure that, you know, she still felt good. So I'm saying right here, you know, 35 at a minimum when you're in a competitive team against other DPS. In fact, the way that I always kind of like laugh about it is like the real nerf to Saryn is multiple Saryns. Because that's what's gonna stop Saryn damage is another Saryn's Spores overriding your Spores. And I do keep in mind that I believe Spores functions in kind of like a way where there are only so many body parts it can be on. So it almost like caps out. Spores almost kind of caps out on how many instances there can be. So if someone manages to spread their Spores so intensely that, oh, see, we hear the decay. If somebody manages to spread their Spores so intensely that other enemies are covered in their Spores, there comes a point where your Spores really won't apply. So that's the best way to kill Saryn damage is to have another Saryn on the team. Having multiple Saryns will really kill the damage output of a Saryn. Let's do a little check. 77%. So we're still rocking and rolling. Like I was kind of saying, you know, I wanted to be realistic with it and kind of say, you know, kind of state the fact that if this were a team that had like another Saryn on it or some more dedicated damage dealers, that percentage would definitely be down. But as you can see right now, because of the fact that Saryn is still quite powerful, she's still quite powerful. She's definitely good at what she does, and she can still dominate the charts. It just takes a little bit more finessing. Just takes a little bit more finessing in order to kind of get it there. Also, one of the greatest ways to spread your spread. And the thing that I like about this too is it kind of also helps. Okay, it's sad. Okay, I mean, let's be realistic. It's sad that we lost the Spore spread on Spore death. You know, when the Spore ends up killing the enemy. It's sad, but it also kind of gives a little bit of a new life to Miasma, because a lot of the times Spores was so strong that you didn't necessarily need Miasma. Because of the fact that your Spores would literally just rank up to ludicrous damage types. Oh my god. I need another enemy to spawn to keep this damage. Oh, thank god. Yes! Yes, thank you. Thank you, spawns. Thank you, spawns, for allowing me to keep this amount. And the thing about it, too, that I definitely made note of was the fact that your Spore ticks, the Spore ticks, like, before I would be able to maintain, like, 4K easily on my Spore ticks. Now it's kind of like it's definitely a little bit of a struggle to get to 2. Are we getting it? No, shit. Yeah, it's a little bit of trouble to even kind of maintain 2 because of the fact that the Spores aren't spreading on death. But then again, you know, that kind of helps keep everything balanced. If enemies are high enough level, that's when your Spore really starts ticking up and starts really getting intense. But at lower levels, it's not so ridiculously overbearing. I know some people are going to hate it and they're going to like, rob your show. But, you know, they want to make sure that other Warframes are also feasible. Ooh, come on, baby. Yes. Oh. It's almost like a game now, too. Oh, wait. It's almost like a game now, too, to make sure that you're able to keep your stacks as high as you possibly can. But, yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. That pretty much does it for my feelings on this current Saryn. I don't want to leave this group because I feel kind of bad if I just end up ditching them, so I'm going to keep on going. However, that does about do it for me for now. Let me know how you guys feel about it, and if you get a chance, try this setup, especially if you've got a status, like a full-on status Zaw, because as you guys know, I like doing a little bit of a blend. However, you know, this might inspire me to kind of give a full-on status one a shot. Maybe I'll even make one of the kind of the scythe ones for Saryn. You know, it's nice to kind of like have a specialized weapon. Just be like, this is Saryn Zal. This one specifically is for Saryn. And as you can see right there, real quick, you saw the way that Miasma actually ended up popping the single Spore that we had left and ended up spreading it to a bunch of other enemies, mainly because of the fact that they died to Miasma instead of Spore. So remember, last ditch effort. If you've only got 1 infected, just go ahead and toss out your Hail Mary pass and do your do your miasma to see if you can spread it instead of, you know, kind of like sacrificing a little bit of your stacks. Keep your stacks as high as you possibly can. But again, that's all. Well, I guess, yeah, that's all for now for this. I'm sorry, this is so sloppy, but I've been out of it for the last few days because of some of the things that happened. But as always, love somebody, hurt nobody, and touch your body. I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye. I gotta go.